Hi folks, with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the complete reversal of, this is in corporate business world, but a complete reversal of the power relations between what hitherto were third world, underdeveloped countries and underdeveloped, people in terms of organizational structures, and the West was far, and continues to be, by the way, far more advanced. But the difference, how it was, say, when I was a kid or a young business guy starting out, how the white people were all supreme, and for obvious reasons. I'll come back to that. But how things have completely changed now. The Asian bosses and the Asian girl bosses, third world country type bosses, bossing around, very seasoned, experienced, capable, credentialed white executives is now to be seen almost everywhere, and that's something that's worth going over, I think. Now, what brought me to this was, in particular, a former colleague of mine who works for a company that's been taken over by a hitherto Western company, been taken over by a Chinese company. They've bought it out in effect, and so his boss is now in China, and she's a member of the part of the family, if you like, that was behind the buyout. So she's just a crony. She's just it's nepotism and cronyism on steroids here. So she's totally unqualified, and her English is anyway. He's recorded. He has to have regular meetings with her, and so he's mentioned this to me previously. She just screams and shouts at him and talk to him as if he's a 2-year-old child, and because she's so unqualified, she treats every interaction that somehow in some way he's challenging her power and authority, but she's going to put him in his place and just let him know who's boss. And she seems to, so he brought a recording anyway. He's been mentioned this previously, and I guess I didn't take a whole lot of notice in it, but it's got to a point where he's really struggling to put up with it. So he recorded it, one of the conversations, and brought it along, played it back to me, and it's every bit as bad, if not worse, than he described it. Me boss, you do what I say, Don't you question me, me boss, you do what I tell you. And it's that sort of level of conversation. She's not capable of giving him any guidance. She doesn't know jack shit. He's the one with the expertise. But she's the superior, boss woman, and she lets him know it in no uncertain terms. Something that's highlighted even more by the fact that the work required has quite a heavy technical aspect to it, and he does have that expertise and she does not. So you double science this month, I say you double, don't you tell me, I tell you. And it's that sort of thing. So he explains that, well, there's actually no stock or this or that or logistical things or technical things as to why that's a challenging thing, but it could be done, sort of planned for. No, don't you tell me boss, I tell you, and so on. So it's you could make a comedy skit out of it. I mean, she's beyond unqualified. If I was the boss and I heard her talking that way to a subordinate, she'd be out of a job in like seconds flat. But she's part of sort of the ruling communist goon squad family there, so she's well protected, and she's been given that job simply because it's a crony type nepotism thing, and of course it's prestigious. She can swan around. Me, Asia Pacific director. Well, white man. I boss of white man. White man do what I say. I boss. And it's that sort of stuff. Now, I've seen this around in other scenarios. I think I've mentioned before in some videos where there's a train turnaround, like on the train line, the public transport. There's a train line turnaround. And this is where cleaning crews come on board the train to, clean it up, pick up any trash or whatever that's there, and so on. And What I've noticed recently is it's older white men who are on the cleanup crew, not third world peasants. It's older white men, but they've got an Asian girl boss. I mean, she behaves like a prison camp commandant, and screams and shouts, and again with a heavy accent. You wouldn't appoint someone like that to that sort of job unless your sole purpose was to humiliate white people. You just wouldn't do it. You wouldn't have people talking that way, treating people like that. You just wouldn't do it. I mean, there's signs everywhere about bullying, and this Asian boss chick, or multiple ones that I've seen, is bullying on steroids, yet somehow they get appointed to these jobs. I mean, seriously. So, now I want to contrast this with when I first started doing business traveling. Now, bear in mind, I'm a young guy in my early 20s, and I got into it, to some extent by accident, and because I was multilingual, they sort of put me in the international section, and then, as people moved around and back and forth, and especially where they had the non-prestigious, hack jobs to do internationally, they were given to me, being the junior guy. But what it meant was I was doing a lot of international business travel at a young age. And I learnt Chinese and all that sort of stuff, and Malaysian and whatnot in the process. Anyway, when I first started traveling, even as a young guy around Asia, for example, bear in mind they're all pretty poor countries, either ranging from developing, poor, or off the planet dirt poor. So those were the places. So I was treated like the big white man. And they treated you as if you were the great big boss, almost a demigod type thing, which took me, I didn't like that. I felt quite uncomfortable with it. They would sort of almost bow and scrape and grovel, and I didn't like that. It made me feel uncomfortable. And I would try and point out to them that all you need to do is do your job and do it well. Say they were a distributor, or they were an OEM manufacturer integrator, or whatever it was that I was dealing with at the time. I say, stop your groveling. I didn't use that language, by the way, but look, just focus on the task. Do your job, do it well, do what's required of the contract and the agreement, and do that. And then that's all I need done. Now, bear in mind, I wasn't the big boss. I was just a flunky they were sending out to wear out the shoe leather back then. Later on, I became a boss, but not at the time. But it was a valuable lesson, and this happened, the sort of way that they view technical jobs and manual labor jobs. When you're sort of an executive, or when you're in a senior position, flunkies do the work. You just give out orders and you swan around, looking tough and looking important and looking magisterial. That's what you do. Other people do work. You've got flunkies to do that. And your very position as, the son of heaven, as it were, is that you don't get your hands dirty. Again, flunkies do that for you. Like the imperial Chinese emperor has 10,000 eunuchs to run around and do the flunky work. So I'm out at a place one day, and they can't get some technical equipment working, and I know I've got a good technical background, so I understand at least the process that I need to go through to discover what the problem is, the troubleshooting to get it working. So I understood that. And the people there didn't know that that they'd been trained, but they were pretty useless. Now, the technical guys who were meant to be coming hadn't arrived, and they wouldn't arrive for a day or two. They'd been held up somewhere else doing something. So I took off my jacket and grabbed a screwdriver and started work. The person who was with me, I think, was one of the C-level type execs in the company. He suddenly became very agitated and are you sure you want to do this? I mean, don't you want to leave it? And I said, well, your customer is expecting this sort of today or tomorrow. The technical people aren't going to be here for 2 days. So if we're going to give the customer what they're expecting, then I need to do something about this now. That I'm paraphrasing what I said, but the guy was still agitated. He had a real problem, and he so he goes, and the people were coming, and the local Chinese people were coming and sort of looking at me and watching what was going on, and they were almost displaying a flabbergasted type approach. And so he took me out for lunch, and I pressed him on. I said, well, why would you care one way or another? We got the thing working. Everything's, it's a success, isn't it? And he sort of came close to me and looked around to make sure we couldn't be overheard. And he said, "No, you're the big white man. You're the big boss. You're the demigod. You can't be seen getting your hands dirty. You can't be seen doing work. Other people do that. These people that saw you will now think less of you. That they will think you're not as important as you. You're actually of lesser importance because you did work and you got your hands dirty and you did things." So now in the West, people would think, "Wow, Billy Bob. Look at Billy Bob. He's versatile. He might be out there swanning around in a sharp suit, but when it comes to it, he can take the suit jacket off, pull out the screwdriver, and do the hard work." I mean, wow, hey, great to have Billy Bob on the team. So it'd be seen differently in the West, but in Asia, in those very stratified societies, I'd committed a social faux pas in many ways, and I degraded and debased myself in their eyes by actually doing physical work. I should have directed other people to do it. Now, the reality of getting the job done on the spot, the necessity of it, screw it. Other people can wait. You can't debase and humiliate yourself and degrade yourself in that way. It's not acceptable. You have to. You're the big boss, and that's it. Now, this became even more pronounced as I sort of moved up through the ranks and became a VP and all that sort of jazz. So they, there were times when, and realizing the sort of the social etiquette type sensitivity of a situation, I would go, okay, no, I better not get out, even though I can fix this, even though I can solve it. And I would try to direct people to the technical staff. When the people at the very apex speak pretty decent English, or most of them anyway. But the technical people, or the people who actually physically do work, most of them barely speak a word. They are the lower echelons. Now, in Indian and Chinese and other societies, people that do manual labor of any sort, whether it's technical or whatever it is, people that do manual labor are the lowest. You are lower in the social strata. You are, you're not important. The people that swan around, looking important and acting big time and acting demigod and all this sort of stuff, they're the important people, and it would be absolutely beneath them to do any work. And Indians that come to Australia, particularly the Brahmin type Indians come to Australia, they're shocked to find that tradesmen, plumbers, electricians, all that sort of stuff, do quite well and are paid quite well. They're shocked a bit, but why do you pay them so well? They're the lowest strata of society. They're just the shit. They're the shit on your shoes. Why do you pay them? You should pay them based on their class structure importance, not the work that they do. And this was the very, very sort of essence of the difference between Western society and these societies. The value of the work you did was irrelevant. Your social status and maintaining the behavior consistent with such a social status, that was important, and that was of primary importance. And so when it changed around, and I saw this. I mean, again, when I first started doing business traveling around Asia, I was treated with the utmost respect, deference on steroids. But over the years and by, I would think probably the mid 1990s, give or take. By the mid 1990s, that was already starting to change. The rise of China, the outsourcing of American jobs or Western jobs to India and China and this sort of thing. The fact that Western companies weren't buying up market share in those areas, because this was very much the big sort of Asian thing. White guy would come along and just want to buy market share. They didn't want to be bothered with the complication of sorting through the market dynamics and logistics. So just throw free stuff. You throw money at it until you've got a decent market share. So the corrupt goons, of which there are many in those societies, they just very gladly stuffed all that money, or most of it anyway, in their pockets. So they saw white people as just disgorgers of vast, torrents of money and goodies and handouts and freebies, much as they do today when they come to the West and just want handouts and freebies. Anyway, this was so by the mid 90s, the Western companies were starting to stop that, buying the market share, and were starting to behave different, starting to appoint local Chinese people as managers and this sort of thing. And of course, as China was becoming richer and the West poorer, then the Chinese companies began to buy up some of these Western companies. So that was the the transition that brings us to kind of where we are today. And so this is where you get, but again, the difference is that not all, but many of the that's changed with DEI and affirmative action, but many of the Western seasoned executives, senior straight white males, of which, they're all in their 50s plus today, they were, they now don't report to a white boss or an American boss, or which hitherto would have been the case. And I remember, I pretty much always reported to somebody who in one way or another was smarter and more knowledgeable than me. Now, it could have been that it was someone who was technically more knowledgeable. It could have been someone who, from an overall business perspective, was more knowledgeable. But it's someone who'd worked their way up to that position through accomplishment, achievement, and through just credentials, hard work, and so on. Not that wasn't changing, and affirmative action flunkies and just the goons and the stooges from the finance companies and the big banks were getting appointed, and so that was also happening. But what's happened now is that many of these business people, C-level type execs in Australia, are now report into totally unqualified Asian bosses, whether they be Chinese or Indian, and these people are there simply because through cronyism and patronage. None of them are there because they know what the fuck they're doing. But there's an added dimension now, which comes back to the Asian mindset, that if you do if you report to them, you must be of a lower social strata anyway. But if you do anything resembling work, then you must, again, you're obviously of a lower social strata. And your social worth in their sense is far less than theirs. Now, if they're completely unqualified, which this Chinese chick is screaming at the other guy that he recorded, then you've got the added insecurity of you're now the boss of the white guys who for 2 centuries were your boss. You're now their boss, but they have all the expertise, the knowledge and capability, and you, the screaming Asian girl boss, you have none of that ability, capability, knowledge, or competence. And so in order to overcome that insecurity, you scream and shout at these white guys to show them, me boss, me boss. Now, I've come across these and I mentioned the issue of the train, the train cleanup crews and the screaming Asian girl boss there who behaved like a prison camp commandant. But also, there was we were doing we had a contract with a local company, and and apparently their parent company is Chinese, and they've got an office in Singapore which administers the Asia Pacific region. And we got a call from a young woman who'd be, I don't know, mid-20s. She happens to be the daughter of the CEO, and she's never done a day of work in her life, but she's calling. I check on what you do. Make sure you do good job. Make sure you not rip us off. I watching you. You take care. I watch you. And absurd. Again, you could make a comedy skit out of it. But these people come from, not only do they see any sort of work as being menial and below them, it separates the privileged from the dross and the proletariat. But they also have they come from a very low trust society. So anyone that isn't a family member or someone or you don't hold anything over them, then you can't trust them. Then you have to let them know, I watch you, you not steal from me. And so they immediately go into this strange sort of, dance macabre of defensiveness and pugnacity and threats and so on, because they can't conceive of a situation where we've been contracted to do a job. We want to do a good job. We want you to be happy because we want you to come back and do business with us later, next week or next month or whenever. So we want to do a very good job. We don't want to rip you off. We've got no intention of ripping you off. We're in at least relative to them, we're in a much higher trust society. So we don't need to go through any of this. We'll just do the job and do it well, and we'll do it for the agreed price, and so on. But they can't conceive of a world that way. They just cannot comprehend it, and so they behave just as low trust, people from low trust societies do. with a sort of a paranoia. Now, bear in mind that the Chinese education system has talked about, it teaches at great length and with much emotional intensity, talks about what they call the 100 years. It's a generic term, by the way, it's more than 100 years, what they call the 100 years of humiliation. And they present themselves that before the white man turned up, this is in like the early 1800s in particular, but before the, as in the Industrial Revolution was taking off, before the white man turned up, China was the center of the universe. It was a righteous and harmonious society, which was bullshit, by the way. It wasn't, far from it. It was a righteous and harmonious society until the white man turned up and fucked everything up. Now, the Chinese do concede there was an internal dissent, which made opposing the evil white barbarian even harder, but they nonetheless, now because of the white man's superior technology, they were able to force terms on China, such as terms related to trade and things like that. And putting trading bases in there. Shanghai became effectively an international city, those sorts of things. And this is something that the Chinese communists in particular view with much resentment. It's something that, when you talk to Chinese people, ones who haven't been, ones that maybe they're only 30 years old, when the situation comes up, they almost tremble when they recount the humiliation of China. Not that China was just humiliated, but humiliated by the white barbarians. This particularly seems to stick in their craw. And so today, the view that many of these people have been put, the Chinese people have been put through the education system, is that, we know boss, now we tell you, we tell you, we know boss. And they've got very much that attitude. Not every single one of them. There are ones that have been educated and worked some years in, say, a Western country, and they're probably a little bit more gentle with it. Now, when the reverse is the case, where Chinese people report to me, which they have in the past, through various offices in Asia, I wouldn't dream of treating them that way or talking to them that way. Instead, we're there to get the job done, solve problems together. I can show them how things work, and that was the relay. I want them to be successful in doing, achieving the company's goals and objectives. There's no personal issue where I have to scream and shout at them, "Me boss!" I wouldn't even enter my head for a second. But to them, it's very much how they see the world. Now, the same can be said for Indians. The Indians sort of have never forgiven the British or the white people, the Westerners. Was the Brahmin class with the demigods in India, and the white people supplanted them at the apex of the social power tree. And even today, the Brahmins are still rankle. Even ones that were born years after the British were gone, they still sort of jump up and down about that. So Indian bosses, when they've got white man as subordinates, they're almost exacting some sort of twisted, perverse social revenge for what happened centuries ago. So this is what's going on, and it's harmful, I think, in many ways. Even bosses in Singapore that have been, Hong Kong, that were exposed for quite some time to the white man's way of doing things, and white man structures and this sort of thing. Even them, they are still quite brutish in how they manage white, and they think everything's a negotiation, and you have to show the white guy that you're in charge, that you can stand toe to toe with the damn evil white barbarian. And again, these things are not helpful, far from it. But it's the way things have gone, certainly in the world today, around Australia and the Asia Pacific. You've been at Tassos today at your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.